Good morning. I was looking through Facebook a little bit ago and I saw this Ralph Waldo Emerson post that I shared. And I think it's one of those things that's really true is that we need to look at today and rejoice in today, and we'll be much better off. Today we look at Jeremiah 12 through 14. Just as a word, tomorrow on Saturday, tomorrow I might be on at 9 o'clock, but more likely, the next 2 days I'll be on early. We'll be out and going to Minot tomorrow and at the Pride of Dakota show Friday afternoon and Saturday. So Saturday morning for sure I'll be on early. Tomorrow, that's yet to be seen. But as we look today at Jeremiah 12 through 14, Jeremiah starts out in chapter 12, you will be in the right, O Lord. God's ways are true and God's ways are right. And what he does is he can't go against himself. He can't go against who he is. But yet the court of the law that God has shaped and given to us points out to us, that we fail the test every day. And that's one of the things in that Ralph Waldo Emerson quote was, there's absurdities and we screw up every day. And we do. But here, God is lamenting that the people are placed there. He's chosen them. And they, their heart, it says, yet far from, you're in their mouths, yet far from their hearts. They pay lip service, but the goodness of God and God's laws aren't within them. They're not following them at all. It's the question that comes up in here again too, as to why is it that sometimes the wicked, or the bad people seem to have so much, and sometimes, crooks, get wealthy because they're crooked. But, God, or the image, the thought was always that, the people who were faithful to God would be more richly blessed, and those who were unfaithful would be cursed and condemned and would have all this evil going on against them. But the rains and the sun and all things come equally to those who are good and to those who are evil, and to those who know God and to those who don't know God. And it isn't, it just seems so unfair sometimes that those of us that try to follow God and hear God, don't have these extra blessings, don't have everything that we should have, but that's, not the way God works. But it's always been kind of a thought that, excuse me, good things, better things come to those who know God. Although God is saying, my people have forgotten me, and, a lot of chapter 12 is God just, lamenting, mourning, just wishing that his people would know him, and like verse 10, especially, many shepherds have destroyed my vineyard. They've trampled down my portion. They've made, they've made they've made it a wilderness. They've just totally destroyed it. My shepherds, the kings, the leaders, the rulers, and, and it goes back to, was when the people were more apt to hear the prophets and following God that way, and there were prophets in the land, like, Moses and Abraham, those leaders. But then the people said, we want a king like this country and like that country, and we want a king. And then the kings end up with too much power, and some were faithful to God and some weren't, as we remember from reading through Kings. And so here God is lamenting, bemoaning the fact that, many shepherds have destroyed my people. And as we, get on in through chapter 13 and 14, You know, he talks about false prophets, especially in chapter 14, you know, that, you know, people are claiming to be prophets and claiming to speak for God, and God says, I haven't sent them. I haven't given them those words. They are lying. They are leading people astray. And we have that today as well. As always, there have always been false prophets that way. But anyway, going back in chapter 12, God is regretting that Judah is going to be ravaged by foreign countries, but that they're going to be taken over by others because of their unfaithfulness. And you know, so here it kind of goes back to that, you know, why are good things happening to bad people, and why are bad things happening to good people? You know, the opposite of what we would expect. But you know, here in this Old Testament time of God having chosen the Israelite nation as his people to be a light to all nations, when they disobeyed and when they turned away, you know, they were punished by God, you know, and they were somewhat forgotten by God. And then in chapter 13, you know, God has a unique way to point out the corruption that is coming from these foreign leaders. He tells Jeremiah to go buy yourself a linen loincloth and put it on your loins, but don't dip it in water. So I bought it. And then the word of the Lord said, take this loincloth and go bury it, you know, now by the Euphrates in the cleft of the rock. So he went and buried it. And then now go dig it up. And when he goes to dig it up, you know, it's dirty, it's soiled, it's rotten, it's no good. The corruption is there. And, you know, and once that corruption is there, I mean, that loincloth, you know, his clothing was ruined. It was no good. It couldn't be restored. And this is, you know, the corruption that had come to the people. You know, it says the loincloth was ruined and good for nothing. And that's kind of the way God is starting to feel about his people, the Israelites. He says in verse 9, just so I will ruin the pride of Judah and the great pride of Jerusalem. This evil people who refuse to hear my words, who stubbornly follow their own goodwill and have gone after other gods, will be like this loincloth, good for nothing. Good for nothing. You know, as parents raising our children and speaking to our grandchildren, speaking to any youth, we need to be positive. We need to be, you know, use constructive criticism. You point them into the right direction of their ways, you know, and if we continue to tell somebody you're good for nothing, you'll never amount to anything, pretty soon they're going to believe it. And here, you know, God points out this loincloth is good for nothing, and he says, my people are good for nothing. And I mean, I would really hope that we don't use that phrase to talk about someone, because it is such a put down to be good for nothing. There's a story about this person who was just despicable and ornery and mean, and just nobody liked him. And someone said, well, he can always be used as a bad example. So even no matter how bad he was good for something. He was a bad example, which is not to say anything. But this person that saw that even in that person's total supposedly worthlessness, there was something that could be found, something that could be emphasized, and to say that someone is good for nothing is so hard, and for God to say that about his people Israel, to see no good left in them, to see that they were following idols, that they were, you know, it was not a good thing at all. And then in verse 15 and 16, 17, you know, it's the people's last opportunity. You know, he says, "Here, have ear. Hear and give ear. Don't be haughty. The Lord has spoken. Give glory to the Lord. He brings you out of the darkness." You know, it's kind of the last opportunity for the people. It's a call again through the prophet to come and to take God into their into their hearts and to follow His word. And then they don't do that, and the land is overrun. And then we see the shame of the people, and in the remainder of chapter 13, and how it talks in verse 23. Can Ethiopians change their skin, or leopards change their spots? Those who do good are, it's change is hard. And when you're so used to doing something, it is so hard to change. And then when we come to chapter 14, the prayers of the people are there, and they're pleading with God. Yet you, O Lord, are in the midst of us. We are called by your name. Do not forsake us. God has called them good for nothing. And they say, don't forsake us. Don't give up on us. Don't give up on us. And God will never, never give up on any of us. Verse 10 is a hard verse to hear. The last part, He will remember their iniquity and punish their sins. There's another place, He will remember their iniquity and punish their sins no more. And I have those two words, no more, not again, but here, God is not willing to hear their plea. God is not. He sees their duplicity. He sees their sin. He sees their deceit. And they're following these false prophets, as I mentioned earlier, as we get into the middle of chapter 14. And, verse 19, have you completely rejected Judah? Does your heart loathe Zion? And have you forgotten about us, God? Have you forgotten about us? And again, it's, pleading for God's mercy. And this chapter ends, we set our hope on you, for it is you who do all this. It's the people are starting to understand, asking God, pleading with God, praying to God. And that's what we do. I hope we do that every day. We pray to God. We come to God with our concerns, with everything that's going on in our lives. And when we do that, when we open our hearts to God, and when we know that our sins are forgiven, that God remembers them no more, we can go on with a lighter load and a brighter aspect, a brighter outlook on life each day.